very good afternoon, everyone. We hope you enjoyed your lunch. We begin our post-lunch session with an interesting dialogue, understanding mentoring impact, costs, and financing. This dialogue will bridge perspectives from practice and philanthropy, exploring how organizations and funders can meaningfully measure mentoring impact and understand costs and financing of mentoring programs at scale. I welcome Arundhati Gupta and Sayantani Gaddam for this dialogue. Arundhati Gupta, as we know, is the founder and CEO of Mentor Together. Sayantani is head of programs at the British Asian Trust India, leading initiatives in digital skilling, mental health, and conservation. With over 25 years of multi-sector experience, she has guided cross-functional teams in strategy, program design, execution, and stakeholder management across geographies in not-for-profit and social development consulting organizations. Her work focuses on mainstreaming community concerns, participation, and amplifying their role in shaping public systems. Welcome, Sayantani and Arundhati. Over to your dialogue. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I've been advised to let Ian know that I do have my phone and that I need to use it to coordinate so it's not for nothing. With your permission. No, thank you so much, everyone. It's been so fun. We've just been reflecting on the first half of the day and how, despite running over, that it was a packed room and a riveting conversation until almost 2 o'clock. And that meant that there was a lot of alignment and interest in the topics that we were all discussing. For Sayantani and me today, this dialogue is a chance for us to really just open the floor to understand certain questions that you may have around these 3 specific topics. That's mentoring impact, costs, and financing. And to take those and to open the floor to a discussion that we both can have. From the practitioner lens from our side at Mentor Together, really building, designing, scaling mentoring for the last 15 years. And from Sayantani's perspective, both as a program practitioner and now wearing the hat and the lens from philanthropy. And the British Asian Trust does some incredible work, not just in India, but in South Asia and in the UK around just lots of interesting topics that relate to this field of impact costs and financing. So we'd like to start actually we'd like to shape this up in these 3 questions, impact, costs, and financing, and address each of them in a section. So I think to start off with, we have a couple of ideas to share, but we'd love to hear from you. What are your top questions around mentoring impact? In the last few panels, we've been guilty of not being able to take enough questions to start with, so we're using the benefit of both of us, fewer people who to take up time. So if we could start with your questions, we'll keep those in mind in terms of answering the question around mentoring impact. Yes, I see a hand in the first row, so if we could just pass the mic around. It's coming from way up. Right here, Swati, the first row. Yes, if we could just have more mics moving
my name
around.
is Arjun, and I'm here from Delhi. I run an education venture, and I also have a curriculum for social impact, incubators, accelerators. So I'm here because I have this curriculum, and I was thinking of this is a great forum. So my question is, and I can go on with my reflections and, plaudits, but the key is for different pieces of the puzzle to fit. For instance, I'm an educator, and I wish to make impact, and not for wealth creation for myself, but in general of what I've built and is working. How can this association or this group forum help?
Okay, sure. So if we understand, the question is around how can the mentoring summit support this larger work that you're doing?
In general, it could be, for me, it's like I'm an educator. Someone else could be different parts of the puzzle, right?
Sure.
So each one is here to make collaborations
Sure,
happen.
sure.
And then
We may just generalize that question. We'll take a few and then speak. We may just generalize that question to what is the impact of mentoring likely when educators get into the picture, which is an interesting topic that we've spoken about.
Yeah.
So we'll take a few more questions around what comes to your mind when we talk about the impact of mentoring. I see Nikita's hand up and way up there as well, Swati. Yeah.
Hello, this is Namrata. My question is how to create an impactful mentoring program with limited budget or cost.
Sure. Sure.
I don't know if it's the same question I'm asking as that gentleman. I couldn't hear him clearly. But I think for me, it's a very basic question. How do you assess the impact of mentoring? And who are you looking to assess this impact on? Is it always on the young person? Or is there also a success indicator attached to the mentor? Because at the end of it, the mentor also, I'm assuming, is doing this for a certain value they want to derive out of the process. So how do we go about assessing that? And for me also, like, because there is so many different things a young person is experiencing, how do you attribute the success to mentoring specifically? So how do you separate it from everything else, that's happening? So yeah, just some of that is what I'm curious to hear about.
Sure. Great question. We'll take one more and then.
Hi, my name is Sushmita, and my question is regarding the impact in terms of gender. So, what does it look like for mentoring with respect to gender? How does it differ? And especially from the mentor's perspective, because what could the role of mentor be in bringing some gender responsive mentoring actions? Thank you.
We'll just take one more. Yes. Whoever has the mic.
Hello. Can I speak?
Yes, we can hear you.
So, I'm Jalajakshi. My question is, what is the outcomes you have defined for yourself in this program? I would like to know 2 or 3 outcomes.
Sure. So,
Yeah.
I'll just summarize a couple of the questions and share a few of the things that I'm thinking, and then Shantani will share as well. So the question was, what is the role of educators in designing the impact if you think of the model? How do you create a program on limited budgets? How do you fundamentally assess the impact of mentoring on the mentee-mentor? What is the impact of mentoring in terms of gender, especially if you're working with young women, and what roles do mentors play specifically in that, right? And I may have just missed the last question. Oh, how do you even start to measure? What are you trying to measure, right?
The last question was more on the lines of here.
What are the
towards-
outcomes, right? Okay, sure.
So same on the lines of how do you choose certain outcomes, because this is again human growth and human learning perspective.
Yes.
So out of the so many domains of development and learning, how do you pick and choose?
Sure. So shall I have a go at a few of them?
I think,
Shantanu?
yeah, Arundhati, you go first, because let's hear as mentor to go, what have been your experiences with impact and
Yes.
programs? And then I can layer it on that.
Sure. So I think when it comes to assessing the impact of mentoring, I'll start from the broader framework and then move to our program example, right? And this is something, again, common to most MEL, and we'll then say that's monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and then how we can apply it to mentoring, right? Fundamentally, most programs are measuring outputs, outcomes, and impact, right? At the output level, we always break it down further into not just the outputs are often just the number of mentees you've matched, the number of hours of mentoring done, right? The number of curriculum sessions, especially if you have. At the minimum, we've seen that that's an important set of things that any program should report on to be able, especially if you have a design program that has certain reporting requirements. What we add further to it, specifically because mentoring is so, again, all the conversations of the previous half spoke of the quality of mentoring, right? That it can be abstract. So how do you know if it's a good quality mentoring? How do you know if the mentor is trained? I think that is a second piece that has come into the picture more, especially as more evidence has proven that the training and the quality of the mentor, not surprisingly really, but has one of the biggest impacts on the outcome of mentoring, right? It's particularly harder to measure because mentoring happens as so many distinct conversations, right? Dispersed over so many different people and units. At Mentor Together, interestingly, we've been planning and relying on more technology now to get a sense of how conversations are going, especially on the app, because we now have a feature to, if people consent, to give us recordings and to try and analyze that using AI and others to try and get a sense of what's the pulse of the conversation. So I would say at the minimum, first measuring output, obviously the reach of the program, but also very importantly, the quality. Even if you can't measure quality through like an objective assessment of mentors' performance or conversations, we still can rely on measurement, like mentoring quality relationship skills, right? Which again borrow from therapeutic practice, etc., in terms of what's called like the working alliance. How happy are you with your mentor and mentee? So those are still measures that you can use, right? When it comes to the outcomes, yes, it depends very much. So I would say quality measures you can do irrespective, because any program should be measuring the quality. When it comes to the outcomes, it depends a lot on the theory of change and the objective that you've set up, which I think Meera and Gunjan spoke so well about in the last panel. We often look at it as outcomes which can get measured through the mentee's own self-report often, and then outcomes which can be more objectively measured in terms of, especially for us, like job market and other indicators of how they're doing. I won't go too much into the outcomes just because there's a separate workshop itself tomorrow which is entirely on this, measuring outcomes and others in mentoring. And I think when it comes to the impact question, like what you asked, Nikita, it is how do you causally attribute it to mentoring, right? And of course, the only way formally, the only way to do it in a statistical way is to do a randomized trial and others. It's been difficult to do that practically for us because I can see you nodding your, how do you start to put in randomization into a program that's not going to deny people benefits and others? But a lot of mentoring studies, and I think Livia can speak a little bit to her study when we do the last panel, but those have tried to causally attribute the value of certain outcomes to mentoring through randomized experimental design. So those are what I'd say. I'd like to hand it over to Shantanu, and then maybe we can think about the gender question after that.
So the thing is that, first of all, whatever we have practiced so far, in education coming, because largely mentoring has been a spin-off from the education field. And then later on, when the urban industrial processes started to get more formalized and hierarchies built up, then in situ skilling, because of that, the rise of mentorship also came up, that certain leadership qualities needed to be developed amongst the second generation. It started but from the top, because it was sort of thought that the top leader needs all these qualities. Today, in today's age, the whole thing has actually become democratized, much more democratized, because first of all, the location of knowledge is dispersed. So location of knowledge is no more in the hands of a few people or a particular community or a particular country. And the digital is actually a huge benefiter. It has given us the technology to be able to do that. But mentoring has fractured because earlier mentoring was part of the skilling program. It is now turning into a specialism of its own because of the time constraints and the amount that is needed in just training. So definitely what qualities a trainer has is to be very good at ensuring that that particular skill is well imparted to the person who is getting the training. But in terms of a mentor, the role is much more, and not everybody, like in like in any system, when there is a human factor to it, everybody may not have the same quality to be able to act as a very good trainer and a very good mentor. So when these differences start to crop up, then time becomes ripe that maybe this needs a specialism of its own kind. And also the increase of knowledge around the area. So with the knowledge of the brain, with our anxious lives, with our getting fractured and getting more mobile from our spaces of work, from our spaces of home, the need also has gone up. So mentoring today has become a very important aspect. I'll take a little bit of time of my earlier experience while doing early childhood, putting that in the government system. So when we entered the field, there was nothing. There were some classrooms and some teachers, not enough children also. So to increase first the access, the enrollment, you had to give the teachers the tools and the training. So there was a flurry to develop the most experiential, what will attract a child. It was, with today's thinking, it was not done in the 1960s, but of more recent origin. And we had a lot of knowledge that was available to catch up, so people made curriculums. Alongside that, the teacher training started. But we saw that with curriculum, with all the rigorous teacher training, practice was not changing in the classroom. And then the role of mentoring came in, because the person has to be a coach, and a mentor has to guide this teacher to shift the habit. Because without the shifting of the habit, it's very easy to fall into the same system. The teacher is not in a powerful situation to change the assessment system in the government schools. So if the certain systems are being designed top-down, then the last mile person who's impacting and on whose basis you're changing learning outcomes, like you've given ambitious learning outcomes target, then how will that process change without that person transforming their pedagogic habits? And that pedagogic habit cannot shift with repeated hours of training, because it is not a contained urban industrial thing that 20 times you have to tighten this screw, then this screw has fitted right well and it can pass the quality test. So these are human beings. Each one will need a different set of parameters to work it through. How each one does, what innovation they bring to their pedagogy, all needs the oversight of a mentor. So by that I'm saying that mentoring impacts will take some time to really be able to be achieved in the strict sense. Today, what we report from organizations who have gone wholeheartedly into mentoring is the reach of mentoring. But the impact of mentoring will come out from things like, let's say if you're doing mentoring for the young adults. So you'll have to see maybe number of cases maybe of mental health reporting, has it gone down or not? You could have indicators like saying retention or increase in attendance in particular class, increase in scores. So you have to look at variables which have changed and therefore could attribute this. You also have to take a mentee's appraisal, right, I think, for the mentorship to work. Very recently, I just visited a school, and in a group, I was asking who's their favorite teacher and why to a set of girls. And one girl, she was very shy, and she named a teacher, and her group agreed. And I asked, why is she your favorite teacher? She didn't say that she was the best in the subject or she dressed beautifully. So she gave a qualitative assessment. She said, she listens very nicely to me, and I feel free to talk to her. So this is the kind of teacher who is already showing signs of high mentorship potential, because these are qualities you need in any mentorship. So communities where learning happens, mentors and have to be selected like champions, because it is a quality that you can't create through a university degree or through a certification course.
Yeah, I think that adds an idea of building from what Shantanu said is probably relevant to orgs that are thinking of layering mentoring but may not have budgets to do it in a very specialized way, right? So I think the idea that I really like from this is to say that sometimes there are existing roles that can take on the role of a mentor as an additional responsibility, and those have to be identified in some way through looking at their attributes and so. I think that's a great way to think of layering mentoring, especially if budgets and resources are limited. I think there was a question also that, Nikita, you asked about the outcome on mentors, right? Which is a very interesting component. And I think for us, we've just started measuring it this year in the project that we mentioned that we're doing with BT and with IKEA, where we are measuring 3 things. We're measuring empathic listening and how that improves over the course of mentoring. We're measuring leadership practices of mentors, and again, seeing how those improve by virtue of guiding and supporting another young person. And very interesting, a measure that actually our academic collaborator, Livia, got us onto the train of is measuring something called learning orientation. Are people fundamentally capable of learning from those who they may not see as their equals or superiors? Because that is a very interesting perspective, right? In companies and others where you have a lot of hierarchies, everyone listens to their boss, right? But do you listen to someone who doesn't have the power, and do you have the capacity to recognize what you can learn from them? So interestingly, learning orientation is a frame of work that we've started trying to measure in mentors, especially in our programs where they have to be a successful mentor, learn from their mentee. So those are 3 things that I think are very promising things to measure in mentors themselves. And then, of course, like, do they do better in their jobs, right? That would make the case for someone like Ian even stronger if he could go back to his company and say, look, everyone who's mentored is not just saying this was a good learning experience, but there's unequivocal data that they're doing better in their jobs, so more people should mentor. To just the point around the gender responsive, the impact on gender, I think so many of the outcomes which we're trying to drive through mentoring have a difference in outcomes, or a difference in the problem because of gender. So mentoring has to tackle those, right? When we started working with students in college, we thought it's just a standard issue of unemployability, lack of work readiness skills, all the headline reports you read, right, in the India Skills Report or XYZ. Only when you look closer, you'll see that actually the problem is that you're getting equal numbers of men and women to college, but losing 70% of the women after college, right? So if mentoring doesn't tackle why the women specifically aren't able to make that transition, it's lost its purpose. And I think there, an interesting role which is sometimes different, like we've again taken the role of the mentor to be generally someone who has a capacity to build a good relationship, a nurturing relationship, to provide that guidance and support. In this situation of where you're tackling young women not being able to make labor market entries or transitions, the role of the mentor as an advocate became very important, which is an interesting role. I can give you all that advice and support, right? But am I willing to take a stand for you? Will I do something about some of the societal and other things that you are facing, right? Which has not been a role given to mentors a lot. And I think that's also something we're trying to explore in terms of how much can our mentors truly become champions and advocates for some types of norms that they have to speak up against, because it's not enough that they just say it to mentees. So those are other aspects to add to the theory of change of how mentors can make a difference, and can they take on those roles.
On the gender part, I wish to add that every aspect of our life is gendered. Because our conditionings are very different. So even the role of mentor, the person has to be conscious of the gender he or she or they are addressing. So therefore, it's a question that goes into mentor preparation. So if the first time the mentor is going through and gets structured capacity building of how to be a good mentor also, I think the gender responsiveness should definitely be addressed there, because genders come with different kinds. It's a social construct. So all of us come into a room, even though the conversation may be one-on-one, but we come in with our social constructs. And this has to be addressed by the mentor to dissipate as much of that, and also understand the problems that mentee may be having are also gender-based. and not necessarily independent of that.
And I can share a story from one of our colleagues that speaks to how difficult, how pervasive that problem is, right? We were sharing how we got this huge crop of mentors who signed up to this advertising campaign we ran, and we were flooded, and we've been working through them. 70% of our mentees are women, but 70% of our mentors are men, right? And all mentors were told that this is a program that's supporting young women in college, and we'll support you and others. And one of the mentors got matched to a mentee, and then in their first meeting told our staff member कि ओ ये female है, मैं इनके problems को solve नहीं कर पाऊंगा, तो मैं मतलब program नहीं करूंगा, right? And exactly what you're saying, right? That you don't have you assume that this is, you're completely missing the point of trying to be empathetic and understanding at all. So I think that's a really, and thank you for who asked the question, because I think in the training that we've been talking around that what mentors receive, I think how to be gender responsive and what should you do is a very is a topic that even we feel we need to do more, because these were mentors who did our training and then turned up and said, I don't know how to mentor a mentee of a different gender. So yeah, that was a great question. Thank you. So if we could, so assuming we got some of these aspects of costs of impact answered, right? And again, I'd encourage us tomorrow, there are a host of workshops around measurement of impact, designing programs, all of those will go into these even more hands-on. Maybe we can talk about costs and finance together, because in some ways they go together, right? And someone asked that question about what if I have less resources? But what are the other questions that come to your mind in terms of the costs of mentoring? Yes, here.
So hi. So one thing I want to ask, because again, mentoring is something which is very voluntary based. But if you want to really see the long-term impact, and like if you want to make it more consistent, so like, you know, how does that cost? Like if we put some incentives in it, so how does that work? Because there's no right incentive amount which is there. So that is one thing which wanted to know.
Other questions on the cost of mentoring? Maybe I can ask a question, maybe a little but what do you think mentoring should cost? Just throw out some numbers, right? There's a young person in a school that you want to provide a mentor that it meets them at least 2 or 3 times a month for a full school year. So that's about 9 times a month, 9 times a year, right? 9 months of the year, sorry, for you're trying to provide them mentoring, right? Think of the fact that we spoke about some aspects of process and quality that should be done. What do you think the number should be in the range of for that mentee? And many of us may be coming from other program contexts where, and all of us in the nonprofit side know our cost per X very well, right? It's a number we live and breathe. So give me a sense from even what you think it should be, even if you're not running a mentoring program. Nikita, I'm going to put you on the spot. Yes. Yeah, so if the Sure, so if the mentor is, there's one type of cost model where the mentor is voluntary, not the cost themselves, but where the mentor may have to be paid, which was your question, right? Okay, other thoughts? Yes, Guria.
Yeah, so I don't think I have the amount there, but I do have a suggestion for you. Since you also partner with LinkedIn, they came up with this idea that they could put a cost on LinkedIn Premium, which was essentially putting a cost on how to make discovery, like, you know, kind of like put a cost to discovery of people and reaching out to people, which in many ways is like, you know, the beginning of getting to mentorship. So, I mean, if you can get how they decided on their cost structure of how they put the premium cost, I mean, maybe you would be able to reach at a number.
Yeah.
Right, I can, and that was a trick in the sense that we do have a number, so we can share, but it was to get a sense of that, yes.
But I want to bring the other narrative that I was very impressed in the morning with, that mentoring, there's a generosity part of it. If we break it down very strictly to cost, then it becomes like something being bought across a counter. the fact that there is a lot of volunteerism around this, the fact that people feel good and leaders are actually assessed in their own companies, how many hours of pro bono, mentoring, etc. support that they give. I think these are very good practices, very healthy practices, not to try and monetize everything. So I think we have not there, which is why mentoring began in institutional spaces. Formal mentoring began in universities and institutional spaces where the time of that person was already bought and recognized. Whatever else the person did, the person was not made to feel insecure because they had to give 1 or 2 hours of mentoring to that person. So I think to preserve the sanctity of that, at this point I feel organizations should continue to keep it as a volunteering practice. But unfortunately, I think in our country, volunteerism is not sort of made as rigorous as in the Western countries. Volunteers are made to feel that they can come and they can do sort of anything. If they do 15 minutes chat with the mentor, that's done. The volunteer also sometimes ducks out of a committed session in the last minute, not giving reason enough as to why. Because the whole process has become too conscious that either I'm doing a great thing by providing this service pro bono, and the second thing is it's not being costed from the agency that is supporting this platform for the mentee. So in both of this, the person who stands to lose is the mentee. So therefore, I think the organizations, if they are getting into formal mentoring practice, must have a very robust understanding, and it's not different. Volunteerism is equal to just their time and not coming, but they sign up to a formal contract. Right. That you can also give a contract. I remember when we were growing up in Calcutta University, there were professors who worked with 1 rupee because they came from very privileged backgrounds, and they used to sign their salary that they will take 1 rupee from the university, right? So you take a token 1 rupee from the thing, but you sign up to a contract that any other employee of that organization who does a particular task needs to do. You can even structure their holidays, etc. All the perks. Because I think this free for all doesn't do good to anybody or anything, but the spirit of generosity and giving shouldn't be lost.
Yes.
Hi.
Sorry, if I could just...
Yes.
I'll just answer that question, and then I think when it comes to the design of mentoring and whether you should, is it a volunteer or should it have to be paid for? We've experimented with those models, meaning does the mentor get paid, right? That was the question. A simple maxim we follow is if the higher the risk the mentee is facing or higher the vulnerability that the mentee is facing, the tougher that situation, and because then mentoring is trying to solve for something pretty difficult. It's not an easy problem. The more your mentor needs training, supervision, and probably has to deliver with some amount of fidelity, right? That means what you're saying they have to do. Then your models should move to models where your mentor can be, if not a full-time employee, someone who is stipended for those hours and others. For example, right, we did a program which was with girls who had been rescued from trafficking. We've done programs with children in a way similar to what we'll talk about tomorrow for care leavers, where again you need your mentor to have a significant amount of training, more than say 20, 30 hours that a typical mentor would go through, right? Then I would say very much you should plan for it, because otherwise for the problem you're trying to solve, the input is not going to be sufficient. In terms of the actual costs that, just to share a little bit from, so in all of these costs that I'm going to share, it's a little bit about it's the model where the mentor is not paid, right? It's a volunteer working with a college student. For us, about our average cost per mentee per year is in the range of between 6,500 to about 8,000 per mentee per year, right? 50% of that cost is towards our team that actually supports the mentor and mentee over a sequence of processes over this full year. what those sequences are all around quality, training, measurement, all of that, right? About 25% of, so we spend a big amount of time, 50% is still on a human resource cost, so to speak, and that's not the mentor, right? 25% of our cost goes towards all those quality checklists that all the things that the previous panel spoke for, right? Doing research, designing, building curriculum, training, monitoring, all of that, supervising the program, right? About 10% of our costs right now are technology for our platform. So the big capex of building a tech platform is now it's about 10% of costs. For only 5% is direct costs, right? That is to support activities on the ground. So I'd say that in this cost per model, a big chunk is still going into the team that has to drive a high quality mentoring program with all operational processes. And our cost models, if we compare it to, so say this is $100 then, right? A Big Brother Big Sisters program in the US, which does a similar model, would cost about $1,100. Even if you bring it down for purchasing power parity and say that's about $300, right? It's not the same. It's still about 1/3 of the cost, right? So compared to models globally, these models are still fairly optimized, but still fairly expensive when you compare to most social sector interventions, which at scale will probably be a few hundred rupees, right? So there is a question to answer about what is the model of mentoring that will scale at a lower cost. Only one idea I'd like to leave is what we spoke about in the previous panel of how technology could help. Our staff do a lot of monitoring and supervision by themselves still, right? They're checking in with every mentor, mentee, observing things, checking for flags, making sure safety. If technology became better at doing that, we could maximize their time for more productive tasks. So that's one model where I see our current costs being able to come down.
Yeah. I also want to add to that, Arundhati, that the cost per se, like if you are to give exclusive mentoring to select group of people who have been selected through a proper process and all of that, then the costing may be financed through grants, philanthropic foundations, via civil society organizations, and that route. But if you're going to scale, we have now the National Mentorship Mission, okay? And we want to go to scale. I think one of the things that whole program should be looking at is identifying mentors in the existing system. This is exactly the problem that, let's say, learning difficulties is happening, with inclusion it is happening. If you keep on sort of saying that we will do this for the government, you will not be able to match the need. And the need is, what you say, it is a very long drawn need which has happened over 7,500 years of neglect. So there is patience required, but the urgency is great, which means it is a sort of a oxymoron here, because you have to reach, you want to touch as many number of schools as possible, but you know that no civil society organizations except for the very large ones, or the government is just not equipped to do this. So that is where I think the mentorship kind of model, which is sort of a layering on the teaching and learning, at least let's say for the education or the higher education institutions, if you wish to scale, I agree with the gentleman before this, the government is the space, because that's where also the most underserved population also goes. And with that, you have to also scale with first reaching, not with so much of robustness and rigor maybe, just touch points of reaching, so that it is like a person, people these days don't even know what mentoring is all about, right? So to create just the first swell of knowledge as to what mentoring really means. Some places it will happen well, some places it will happen badly. It's like introducing anything new. But you have to build a sort of a ground up, because essentially, at the last stop, the mentor-mentee relationship is one based on the mentee demanding the mentorship. But here, because the whole ecosystem has sort of they have no idea what mentorship can do. They are still at that very nascent level. So you will have to find those champions. So like I talked about this teacher can become a primary school mentor,
Right.
you know. She can be put, so these are the systemic changes. So when you are organizations working with governments on systemic change, you can think of this, because if you look at the government's education system, it was designed last in a large way with the district primary education program that was in the 1970s. After that, there has been no change in the roles, responsibilities of the cadres that the government had put down to cover for the last mile. So the systemic shift we are going to, and because I have had experience with inclusive education, with early childhood, so when you go again with a mentoring thing, it's the same system that you'll have to shake. But
Right.
there is no other way. You'll have to shake that system, and people who are working at the, at the national level and at the state level, missions, senior leadership of the organizations, they have to bring the government to look at reform of their institutional system also. We keep on making the best curriculums, we train the teacher the best, we bring in the robust mentorship curriculum, but the system cannot deliver because the system is not been realigned to deliver this, right? So that is the discussion we should have on mentoring also.
I think the models being group and others are a great approach as well, right? If you have to think of a lower cost. Yes, one.
Yes, actually wanted to add pretty much the same point. Because
Is there a
if we need to,
question?
no, I just wanted to add
Sure.
to the current discussion. So if we need to execute this, at the pan-India level, right? So of course, like we need to get the approval from the government. But parallelly, like if we tap into the private schools and colleges, prove this model how it's working, or do the pilot run in Bangalore. Have a like how we generally sometimes, if I go back to my school days, we used to have a GK subject. So it's better, like maybe we should have some mentoring subject once in a week or once in a
Right.
month. Get that data and how it is impacting the mentees or the students, and reach out to the respective state governments.
Sure.
And show the results how it is impacting, right? And the government should approve like 0.2% or 0.3% of CSR funds only in the mentoring,
Right.
so that it can we can impact at the government schools and colleges. So just wanted to add
Sure.
at this point.
No, thank you for sharing
Thank
that. I think that in the financing of things that for mentoring, we've seen again government can create demand very well. For example, last time at the summit, we heard from the government of Karnataka that gave its intention very clearly that they want mentoring across their collegiate network, right? And that was a great spur to private sector to say, this is a existing mandate or an existing vision, and how can we support it? So that can very much catalyze things, right? I want to ask a question that I'm going to build on a conversation that we had with Abhishek from the Dell Foundation some months back, and it was a very interesting, provocative question, and I'm just hoping we could close with that, which was that, do you think it could be a cost model where it is per session? One mentoring session, how much does it cost? How many of you, meaning that's the model itself that a mentee should perhaps, or a program should think of, right? How many of you think you should break mentoring down into one session and cost it at that, by a show of hands? The question is clear? Okay. And the rest of you feel that it should be costed then as a number of sessions? Is that the, right? The entire journey? The whole,
We should
Right.
give both the options, I feel.
sure.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
With the benefit of the mic in my hand, I'm just suggesting, I think we need to focus on those outputs, outcomes, and impacts. So I want to say that even if you're offering mentoring, there has to be an outcomes-based financing. So when I say outcomes-based financing, it's that you pay by the results you've achieved, but you need a working capital. So you can have part of the payment given for being able to run your running cost, but you will get the final payment only once you have delivered what you promised. And those outcomes are chosen commonly with the financier and the program maker in the room.
Sure.
It is mutually agreeable to both.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. No, great. No, so I will have to say that we're a little bit on time.
No, so when we are talking at scale, we talked about that government will have to get involved. If it's a private chain of schools, the private chain of schools have to budget it into their, because children are still not earning, you can't ask the child to pay. And parents are anyway paying to the school, right? For the government, they have to budget this in, or they have to, they just have to do it if they wish to take it up. And the thing is that you will have to, but for the program to show results, because just now we are talking that mentoring hasn't reached that a proof of concept at scale, you can say.
Scale, yes,
at scale, yeah? And like say Karnataka, with your work in Karnataka, it may be the first state that has taken that step. It will take 5-10 years for you to show that kind of results.
Yes, yes.
So the government will pay.
Manasan, is it a quick question?
It's a quick comment actually. It's also a response to your question. I feel like with Mentor Together having so much, I mean, you're doing a lot of assessments and all of collecting all of this data. Not sure, but I have a feeling that this might help us define tiers within the journey. I see a lot of people talking about it as a journey at a large, from a large scale point of view, but reaching a point between per session and the whole journey at once. I feel like if we can, using this data that we're collecting through assessments, if we can define tiers of where we've reached, and then create bundles out of these tiers, and then cost for the bundles based on also the ambition and aspiration of the mentor and the mentee where they want to reach. I think this will also define targets within the mind of the mentee where what I've achieved.
Sure,
That
sure.
is-
No, thank you. I have to follow my colleague who's showing the time up, because most often I'm nudging her to show it in other panels. But no, thank you. This was very interesting in that I think there's clearly like a lot of interest in the fact that what does mentoring, how does it actually impact, and how can we get better at measuring that? I think lesser understanding around the more to be done to make, as programs increase, will make costs more clear, especially in terms of should we pay the mentor, what else should we pay for? And I think a lot to consider in terms of the cost at scale and who should get involved. So I hope that at least from the impact session, some of you that are there tomorrow, you all can dig into that more if you're interested. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shantini.
Thank you, Arundhati. This was a great conversation. And thank you, audience. You all were a great audience. Good questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sayantini and Arundhati, for unpacking the nuances of measuring and financing meaningful mentoring at scale. Arundhati, we request you to give away a small token of appreciation to Sayantini. A big round of applause, please. Please do remember to share your feedback on the sessions. Thank you so much. So as we set the stage for our next panel, we would really like to hear from some of you on what you think is the most important quality a mentor should have. Yeah. You can just, yes. Listening, okay, great. You can just raise your hand and call out, or if you want the mic, yeah. Generosity, yes. Patience. Somebody said passion, okay. Ability to. I think Mike, we can, yes. Switch it on.
to do mentoring, I mean to say. For example, if he is doing something in the mental development of the child or of any person, of a subordinate, so he should be able, he should have some psychological background for that, how he can improve the state of the affairs. That is what is most important, that is required. Everybody cannot be a mentor, even if he has the qualities of a good listener or everything. That is important.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Any more answers? Any of you would like to share? What is the most important quality you think a mentor should have? Ethics and empathy. Being inclusive.